Yes, sir.
Yes, he did.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9PBS.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. What a week we had. Kind of cold. Things are warming up, but NASA's Land Rover Perseverance got on Mars. We've got a panel that's out of this world, and we're going to meet them, starting with the news director for the Big 550 KTRS. She's Wendy Wiese, also the co-host of the Jennifer and Wendy Show on 550. Mr. Bill McClellan from your St. Louis Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com. He's a founder, and so is Ray Hartmann from the Riverfront Times, as well as rawstory.com and the Big 550 KTRS. And Mr. Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American, 590 AM and 97.1 FM News Talk, the Dave Glover Show. We're going to start with you, Bill, but first I want to remind folks that on the second half of this program, we call it Next Up, we're going to be joined by Blake Strode, who's the executive director of the ArchCity Defenders. His organization recently did get into the St. Louis jail in downtown St. Louis. We'll find the results of his inquiry there. Well, Bill, since we met last week, there have been some endorsements on the local political scene. Of course, we've got a mayoral primary just around the corner in early March. And as it turns out, Tashara Jones, the treasurer for the city of St. Louis, got endorsements from Wesley Bell, the St. Louis County prosecutor, and Sam Page, who is the St. Louis County executive. And then Kara Spencer and Lou Reid kind of split the endorsement from your paper and its editorial page, as I understand it, the Post-Dispatch. So what do you make of this overall? First of all, do we even think that these endorsements matter to the voters in St. Louis?
Well, I think they matter in the sense for Tashara Jones that she's the favorite going in. And the favorite, you want to have momentum going your way with all these little things and give everything an air of inevitability. And I thought that the endorsements from the county, from Page and Lisa Clancy and Wesley Bell, were a very good thing for Tashara Jones. And I enjoyed the story in the newspaper about it by Mark Schlinkman, who said that Tashara tweeted back to Lisa Clancy, "Thank you, Madam Chair." And I'm not a big Lisa Clancy fan, but I thought it was a nice touch and cheeky, as they used to say. So I think that it matters as far as image goes.
I agree. I think just, perception is what this is all about in a pandemic. And the perception has been that Sam Page and Lyda Crewson were not on the same page, and that somehow, that has been a sort of a rolling rumor throughout the pandemic, and that the city and the county and some of the policies were at odds. And I think just the sense that, hey, we really like each other, that could make a difference in the minds of some voters.
Absolutely. I do think that, to me, it was a foregone conclusion that the St. Louis Post-Dispatch was not going to endorse Tashara. At the same time, I think she just declined to take part with an op-ed and then I guess their Zoom kind of editorial board meeting with the candidates. And I would have done that. Okay, I certainly understand why she didn't. In fact, it's hard for me to say that she did wrong. I would have done that, but with any endorsement she gets at this time from anybody, they're all good, following up on what Bill said, because, and I want to throw in that, okay, so Spencer releases a TV ad and she attacks Lewis Reed. And doesn't mention Tashara. So maybe it's a battle for number 2 and number 3 to see who gets to take on Tashara. So any endorsement is good for her.
I'm the only one on this panel that's actually done endorsements, I think, and can personally attest to how little they matter. Although people did offer me the opportunity to some compensation for endorsing their opponents from time to time. But I actually don't think that the endorsements matter much. I mean, remember, Tashara endorsed. I know she endorsed Sam, and I wouldn't be surprised if she endorsed Wesley. So, you know, I don't. At first, I thought, it's kind of odd because they've got to work with the other candidates in case they win. But then, you know, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I think actually in the case of Page endorsing Tashara, he needed it worse than she did. I don't know how much good it's going to do her, but he's got enough problems with the African-American community with the Troy Doyle suit out and everything. I think it actually helped him more than her.
Well,
but I think the Post at this point, sad to say, you know, Alvin's right. I mean, there was no question. They've been not, I don't think, fair to Tashara for a long time, and there was no way they were going to endorse her. So, you know, I'm guessing she fundraised off the.
Yeah. I enjoy feuds between politicians and a newspaper, and it's good politics for Tashara Jones to feud with the white establishment. To her credit, though, she still talks to Post-Dispatch reporters, and you know, that's really the big thing I care about, whether somebody wants to.
Charlie, can I say one thing about it?
Yeah, let's move
real
on.
Quick.
But I was going to say, Ray, that I happen to agree with you. I don't think endorsements matter that much. I think people forget them. I don't think people in the city are looking for direction from the county. And, you know, media endorsements are just not that big a deal, like they might have been back when, you know, Robert McCormick was running the Chicago Tribune in the 1940s.
I just want to say one thing about the election, which is I was one of the people who endorsed the new voting system, and one of the concepts was it was going to the approval voting was going to discourage negative campaigning, and I can tell you from talking to people that part of it didn't work.
Okay,
there's a lot of emotion coming down to the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, let's move along, guys, because we do have a lot of topics here. In Alvin, 5 Missouri Teachers of the Year. You know, a teacher every year is selected as the best one in Missouri, and 5 together wrote a letter to the health department in the state of Missouri saying that teachers should get quicker access to the vaccine. I believe they're in a tier that includes daycare workers and grocery store workers. And the suggestion is that these teachers should be bumped up a little closer to the front of the line. Well, they've done that in some places like Oregon, and the governor got some widespread outrage for that. People are saying, okay, if the teacher has a comorbidity, if the teacher is elderly, for sure, but why would teachers get it ahead of a grocery store clerk, for example?
Well, because those stores are open and they need to get it as soon as possible either. Now, I've always said this, speaking, son of teacher, husband of teacher, many teaching relatives. I am very, very much into, especially public education. But forget all this. Open the schools, those lazy teachers, blah, 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 and all that flack. Okay, if you want schools to be totally open, get every teacher in a school vaccinated ASAP, and the result will be schools will be open. If every teacher could get their 2 vaccine shots in the next 3 weeks, at the time where everything was shutting down, you know, about spring break last year, schools could be wide open. So let's just put it the way it is. If you want schools totally open, the best and quickest way to do it is get teachers vaccinated. It's a simple formula.
Yeah.
Dr. Randall, go ahead, Charlie.
No, go ahead, Wendy. I'm sorry.
Dr. Randall Williams of the Department of Health and Senior Services, he says mid-March, by the time the next tier will begin getting vaccinated. I think if you asked the parents of these kids, they would say, let the teachers have their shots. And comorbidity isn't always the best way to predict. I mean, obviously it's important, but I think from what we've all learned, there have been young, healthy people who have died of COVID. I mean, there's still too much that we don't know. And I agree with Alvin. If we want the kids back in the classrooms, we can't say, oh, you know, teachers, hey, good luck.
Okay,
I mean,
but don't forget, Wendy and Alvin and everybody else, a lot of schools are in session, public and private and parochial, and those teachers haven't had the vaccines yet. And the CDC is, hang on a moment, the CDC has conducted studies, and they have not found that kids are transmitting COVID-19 to teachers. It's just not happening. That's the CDC coming out with this just like 2 weeks ago. So,
but Charlie, what is peace of mind is what is stalling this whole thing with opening schools. And there's some parents that don't want to send their kids because they fear they'll get COVID. There's some parents that want to send their kids because Donald Trump thinks they should be in school. Eliminate all of that nonsense. Open up every classroom. And if you're in a public school, a private school or whatever school that's been open the whole time, more power to you. But your teachers should have to be vaccinated.
But
CDC,
Alvin,
and the CDC, Charlie, like every other government agency that's had a hand in this, has had its missteps. So it's not like I'm just 100,000% secure in whatever they're saying this week or last week.
well, are you saying then that the teachers should go ahead of daycare workers? And by the way, daycare has been in session, and we haven't heard of outbreaks among daycare workers. But yeah, should teachers go ahead of daycare workers?
Charlie, you're making arguments that there never was a COVID. We never needed to wear a mask because a whole bunch of people ain't dead. Oh, the 500,000 that are, well, most of them are old. Okay, this is not 1900, Charlie, and this is what upsets me. We act like we are just got off of a darn wagon train someplace in America. We're too smart for this. We're too intelligent for this, and it's just ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous. Sorry. Clayton schools are in session. The kids are in the classroom. In fact, most public schools are, almost all private and parochial schools. What university are you living in, Alvin?
Well, Charlie, in Clayton, it's mixed. It's virtual and in session. It's not all the kids are in school.
Well, I think the grade schools are, correct?
I don't know. I know in high school it's not, but okay, I'll let you go ahead.
I'm with you.
25 states.
Let teachers get vaccinated early. That's such an essential role in America, teaching. Gosh.
Well, the interesting thing is, by next fall, this
won't be vaccinated ahead of most people too.
I think they should be vaccinated, but I by next fall, hopefully.
Okay. Then how about
fall?
Well, let's move to Wendy for the next topic, and that is St. Pius in Crystal City had a basketball game, and they also got a lot of brushback because the folks in the stands were not wearing masks, and the archdiocese just clamped down on the school, even though the administrator was quoted in the paper. He didn't seem to be ashamed or embarrassed or caught off guard or anything. He said basically he tries to do social distancing, but you know what? Just they weren't wearing masks. Now they're going to have to as the round ballers proceed in the tournament and all that. What did you make of this, Wendy?
That Catholic schools certainly have changed over the course of the last several generations. That if you have a pandemic and we are all being told as citizens that if we want to be generous to our neighbors, if we want to be selfless when it comes to our neighbors, then we have to practice social distancing, wear the mask, do all of the things we're told to do, hand sanitizers that most of us are doing. And it's like at St. Pius, woo, I was confused, frankly, and really disappointed. I think this is not a great message for these kids to be taking out of a pandemic.
Well, Charlie, and there's one other thing. Not only does the vaccine not care what religion you are and not see that, but what goes on in St. Pius or any other place like that affects the community at large. Those people don't just go home to their homes and somehow are isolated from the rest of the world. When we have conduct like this that is clearly against all social distancing recommendations of all health officials, it is a risk to the entire region. It's a risk to everybody because we are connected. So you don't get, and I don't think that religious institutions should have any stricter rules against them, on them than anybody else.
Okay.
But this is not about freedom. This is about public health.
Well, real quick, I'll say that I think this is more political than it is religious, athletic, anything. That was just a statement for the world to see that we're down with the fallen
I might
president.
agree with that, but I will also say, first of all, let me preface my remarks before you all jump on me. and that is, I even wear a mask here in our house at times when the college kids are home, because heaven knows where they've been, etc. So if you come into our house, you'll find all four of us at times wearing masks. And I get a lot of brushback from our KMOX listening audience for doing that, but that's the way it is. Having said that, I want to tell you something about what's going on in this country. Some of the places where we have the strictest lockdowns and mask requirements, like California and Illinois, are not doing as well when it comes to the numbers as, let's say, Florida, where people I know have just come back with Florida. Nobody's wearing masks in the restaurants. Nobody is social distancing. The waitresses and the waiters aren't wearing masks. And the funny thing is, that's happening locally too. St. Louis County had the most draconian measures, and it's got the highest deaths per 100,000 compared to St. Louis City, Jefferson County, St. Charles County, Franklin County, all that had lax measures. I'm told you can go to St. Charles, you look at a restaurant, nobody's wearing a mask, but their numbers aren't as bad as elsewhere. So I understand masks are important. I'm with Fauci and the four of you on that, but I also cut this school a little bit of slack.
I think it's about dense population, okay? And then also
Florida, Miami.
But
But
all of the cases are in Miami. See, you're talking about statewide. Go to Miami and see what the death rate is and what the COVID rate is.
It's better than California.
Okay, all right.
I don't think Florida's doing.
Don't wear a mask. Pack the gym. Cardinals
right.
have opening day with 70,000 people there. Go on ahead.
Actually,
right.
Go ahead,
Ray's
on
right.
me.
Yeah.
Florida is comparable to California, but
Florida's not doing well.
Right.
So
according to
it's not
NPR yesterday,
be so glib about Florida.
Yesterday, NPR compared the two and said they're roughly the same.
Well,
but Florida has a much older population, and so it should be much worse off than California. And
not
it isn't
necessarily. I don't agree with that, and I don't know.
All right.
I just mad when this is behind us.
Hey, Ray, I want to ask you a little something about the county council taking $130,000 or so out of the budget of the health department after Rochelle Walton Gray, the former member of the county council, took a job as a vaccine coordinator in North County. Of course, she lost her job in the election last August when she ran for re-election, but she supported Lisa Clancy, the favorite of the county executive, in her bid to be the council chair. And it looks like she was rewarded with this plum job, $90,000 a year. What did you make of the council yanking money out of the health department budget?
It was an interesting statement. First, $122,000, and it was calculated to be the salary plus the benefits for Rochelle's position. I think that the four who voted were making an interesting statement. That would be Tim Fitch and Mark Harder and Shalonda Webb and Rita Herdays. That's the kind of that's the main group that's, we've had this battle going on there. They basically said to Sam Page, if you're going to create a position that appears to be rewarding Rochelle Walton Gray for the vote, then you need to find if you got that kind of money laying around the health department, find $122,000 to cut. They did not say that, they didn't try to strike the line item because they can't of paying her. And that was an interesting statement because I don't think that it was right to create a job like this and have no advertising for it. No, it was a job for one person. I don't think that's how the county ought to do business. So,
well, a question here is, didn't he have to do that anyway? I mean, the money, because the job is in that department, then he can't take the money from like the animal shelter or the highway fund or any of that.
He can take it anywhere he wants out of the health department, and they're basically saying, you found $122,000 in the health department, so you got to cut it somewhere else or cut her job. I mean, they could eliminate her job, or he could cut another $122,000 out of the health department, which isn't a good idea right now.
No, but they're basically telling him what he had to do anyway, which is if you're going to have a position that pays $122,000 in the health department, then the money has to come from the health department budget, correct?
Right, basically.
So it just seems like that's just song and dance. He had to do that anyway. Right.
Well, I think like Ray says, that
added 100.
They're just very upset at what he did, and the only difference, problem I had with Ray was when he said it appears like he, paid her off. I mean, it was just so blatant and wild. I don't blame the county council members for saying we just can't let this happen.
That's kind of like Charlie at the beginning of the show. He said it was kind of cold outside.
Right. I mean, it was just too obvious.
I stand
I'm the only one.
Fellow founder.
I know. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
No, I stand alone. I still think that the position is needed in North County, and getting the word out about the importance of the vaccination to the African American community. And so I stand with the 122,000 and hope that we can keep it.
I'm more on Wendy's side than I am on you all side.
Well, Charlie, it's interesting because
is that good enough, Wendy?
He could veto their resolution, so it could be interesting.
Yes, that's right.
But Tim Fitch on the show the other night didn't think he would, so we'll see.
Okay. Well, Ray, I want to ask you about an interesting wrinkle out of the Supreme Court in Jefferson City. This is the Missouri State Supreme Court. And that is that they have kind of warned lawyers that, hey, if you're working on cannabis issues, just remember that marijuana is illegal according to federal law. In fact, still to this day, people sometimes forget that it's not legal to use, distribute, possess marijuana. Well, what did you make of the Supreme Court sending this message to the attorneys of the state of Missouri that they have to, it's kind of like beware if you're working on these cases?
It was terrible. I mean, first of all, the story in our paper was about Dan Vietz, an old dear friend of mine going back way longer than either one of us would like to admit to college. But Dan has been the heart and soul of Missouri NORML for decades. And Dan raised a great point, which is in 2018, in the constitutional amendment that legalized, medicinal marijuana, there was a specific provision. This is a constitutional amendment that allowed for and anticipated this, said that attorneys could work with the legal marijuana industry. And it was clear in the thing. And what you have here, you've got firms like Thompson Coburn, Armstrong Teasdale. They didn't create whole divisions to work on this if it wasn't clear that that was the intention of the law. And by this logic, or illogic, the bad thing is the Supreme Court's the last, you can't appeal it, and they have misinterpreted the constitutional amendment. And it's very clear that they have.
Well, aren't they saying that
terrible.
Federal law is supreme to the state law? So it doesn't matter what we put in our Constitution if it's illegal on a federal level?
You can't have it in Oregon and Colorado and
all of these other states that already have it, their state Supreme Courts haven't suddenly decided to stop the party. It's just like Missouri figures we're too popular. There's too many people moving in here, and we have too much money. We don't need more tax money. So we alone can come up with this conclusion.
I think this is like a cover, what by the state Supreme Court. Hey, attorneys. Oh, by the way, I'm an attorney, and I know about how hourly fees and all that. But it's my responsibility to say that, hey, what you're doing federally is illegal.
Well, the federal law.
So I think that's all they were doing.
I've been raising this issue a long time, and that is the federal law. I don't know how the states got away with it in the first place.
There'd be dozens of states that have this.
Sometimes, as you know,
sometimes we all voted on it.
Sometimes a lot of states can be wrong. We've seen that in history. That's for sure. Okay, I want to. Maybe we should end on something that's a little lighter, and that is the golf carts in Webster Groves. Alvin, Reid. This week, town officials in Webster Groves said that if the speed limit on a street is less than 25 miles per hour, Bob and Jane Johnson can drive down the street in a golf cart just as long as it's registered. They've got a driver's license, insurance, seatbelt. So you're going down a street in Webster Groves in your car. Do you feel comfortable driving alongside a golf cart?
Absolutely not. This is just a bad idea. It's something bad, waiting to happen. Also, listen, last time I looked, when people were on golf carts, they may be golfing, but alcohol is usually involved. Not every golf cart everybody's drunk, but it's another problem. And it's a motorized vehicle. So it's not a bike and it's not anything you pedal. It's a motorized vehicle. And this is a bad idea. It's just a bad idea.
I think it's dangerous. And it's not just dangerous for the people in the golf carts, which is obvious. It's dangerous for the rest of us out driving. And golf carts, even, is it 25 and under or under 25? Because Elm Avenue is 25 in Webster, and that's a main thoroughfare, and it's really dangerous to other cars. You can slam on the brakes. It's not a good thing for anybody. I mean, other than if you're on a golf course.
I think they're a lot of fun, and you got to try something different in these communities. And, you know, let's all slow down. If the speed limit is 20 or 25, then the large vehicle you guys drive, you just slow down.
Pretend it's a bicycle. I mean, seriously, pretend it's a bicycle for 4 people or 6 people, or I'm all right with it until somebody gets hurt, and then I will be violently opposed to it.
Well, okay. In all seriousness, if somebody makes a mistake in a car and they make a left turn right in front of you, there's nothing you can do. You hit that car. You get out. You say, like, man, you know, our cars are damaged. If this happens, no fault to the driver, and they run into 1 or 2 people on a golf cart, their lives are changed forever. And it's just not a good idea.
You guys don't like crowds at basketball games. What else don't you like?
Oh, you're right. Boy,
you don't like golf carts. If it's marijuana, you're happy.
It's a pandemic.
Yeah.
Go crazy.
Oh yeah. If you're smoking marijuana on the golf cart on the way to the crowded stadium, then you don't get a ticket at all. Right.
Yeah.
I'm taking a crazy liberal view that I do not want to put in the position of killing somebody on a golf cart. Yes.
Okay, but I think Wendy brings up a great point. So you're against bikes on the roads too? Of course not.
No, but a bike is humanly operated. There's not a motor involved on a bike.
There's bike paths.
Yeah.
It's not the same at all. A golf cart is going to, by definition, have to take the space of a car, okay? You can't drive a golf cart where you can ride a bicycle. No, I think it's a terrible idea, and it's dangerous for everybody. And what's the upside again? I mean, nobody's talking about some little tiny that's set off.
It's fun. It adds a little joy to an otherwise bleak existence during the pandemic. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Blake Strode, the executive director of the ArchCity Defenders. He's looking into the city jail and other issues. So we hope you join us. That's just a moment away right here on 9 PBS.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9 PBS.
Thanks for joining us for Next Up. Before we welcome our distinguished guest, I want to remind folks that this Tuesday at 1 o'clock on 9 PBS, we're going to have a virtual discussion of the mayoral candidates in the city of St. Louis. So we hope you join us. For details, you can go to ketc.org. Well, the jails have really been in the news recently, the medium security workhouse, as well as the City Justice Center. And so we're very pleased to welcome the executive director of the ArchCity Defenders, Blake Strode, to Next Up. Mr. Strode, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know that you've been looking at the conditions of the incarcerated, the inmates, the residents, and this past week, as I understand it, you got the go-ahead from a federal judge to take the temperature at literally inside the city jail. And so I think you spent about an hour in there getting temperatures because there were allegations by some inmates and their families that the conditions were either too cold or too hot. What did you find?
Yeah, and just to be clear, this was in the workhouse, of course, 2 city jails, the Justice Center and the workhouse was as part of our ongoing since 2017 litigation on jail conditions in the workhouse. So that's what we were given access to this past Tuesday, sent 2 staff members in. And we're very glad that at that time, the recordings were certainly in a livable range. I don't have it in front of me, but somewhere around 70 degrees in the spaces that they were given access to on Tuesday morning.
And just to clarify, Mr. Strode, you did not get into the City Justice Center in downtown St. Louis?
No, we have not. We along with a few other legal advocacy organizations in the region, requested that last week, and were told that we would not be given access. I think consistent with what everyone has been told since the uprising occurred.
You wrote a great piece in The American in which you sort of outlined the history, and you take us back to Michael Brown and the national conversation that sprang up as a result of his death when it came to police reform and that kind of thing. And you sort of point out very clearly the missteps and the contradictions. What's behind the lack of will to really change things, Mr. Strode?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. One of the points that I made in that piece is that I think we do a really poor job of listening to impacted people. And the more vulnerable, the more marginalized people are, the worse we really are at listening to them. And there's no greater example than the folks who are detained in our jails. We've been hearing from weeks and really for months, but more loudly for weeks about escalating frustration and desperation in the jail, the conditions in the jail, mistreatment by guards. And we've really done our best to try to inform people about this, to raise as much awareness as possible. But it took windows being broken out and this very high profile uprising to make any sort of more significant inquiry, to have media really digging into it, to have people writing letters, to have other protests occur. So I think we just have to get better at listening to people who are typically silenced, typically marginalized, typically ignored. And that is poor people in this region, Black communities in this region, and those who are trapped in the criminal legal system. And so I think that really is the solution to the problems that we continue to face over and over again.
Bill?
Yeah, Blake, let me tell you about a point that's confused me. I know the big progressive movement to close the workhouse, and it's made great steam. And all of a sudden, when there's trouble in the new city jail, in the Justice Center, we're told that, well, the medium security, the workhouse is a better place because it's more secure. And there's crowding in this Justice Center. Why? How would you explain the need then to close down the workhouse? Because it confuses me.
I share your confusion about how the jails are characterized, because for years, as we've been calling to close the workhouse, we've been told that the Justice Center is the more secure facility for the more serious offenders, and that it would be disruptive to that high security jail to put more people in it. And now when we have this uprising in the Justice Center, all of a sudden we're told the locks don't work, and actually the workhouse is the more secure facility. So I think there's a real consistency and credibility problem with the city officials who are in charge of our jails. And I think there is a connection between the effort to close the workhouse, which of course we've been a core part of with Action St. Louis and the Bail Project and many others. There's certainly a connection between what we've been calling for in that campaign and through some of the related legislation and the issues that we see coming to a head in the Justice Center. There's actually a piece of legislation that is sitting in the Board of Aldermen in the Board of Aldermen right now, Board Bill 167, that would have put more money into CJC to do more COVID testing and treatment and strengthen protocols, would have put more staff in CJC to the extent that we're now hearing that the Justice Center is understaffed, would have provided for a new division in the health department to send people into the jail to identify folks that don't need to be there and actually need services and can be released. And many of the same people that are now telling us everything's fine in the jail killed that bill, kept that bill from moving forward just in the past month. So I think there's a real disconnect between a lot of the rhetoric that we're hearing from city officials on this subject. And I'm glad people are finally asking these questions.
It's a time of change, Blake. So St. Louis is about to change mayors, and it's usually unusual that you only have a one-term mayor, but Lyda Cruz decided not to run again. in your piece, and I want to follow up on Wendy. It was excellently done. It was like I say, a very, very. I wish everybody except for Bill. Bill's can write his column the way he wants to, but I wish more actually were succinct. But you,
I read it too. Like I thought it was very good.
Thank you.
It's not like you picked a favorite, but you kind of lit Lewis Reid up in it, when you're going through your chronological order of things. Could you speak to that? And then also, personally or as an organization, are you endorsing a candidate in the mayor's primary?
Sure. Well, I should be very clear that ArchCity Defenders is a 501c3. We do not endorse candidates, are not allowed to do so, and would be in big trouble if we did. So we don't engage in any partisan activity like that. What I pointed to in the piece is that Lewis Reid has been all over the place on the issue of closing the workhouse and has suddenly become very vocal about the fact that it cannot close, should not close. He's pointed to COVID as the reason that we can't close it, even though they passed the bill in the midst of COVID that would have done just that. So I think that he has a lot of explaining to do on why he's been all over this issue. My issue with him is that he's been completely inconsistent. I think that he's making decisions that are harmful for the people we serve and represent, and that really do a disservice to everyone in St. Louis who deserve to see our tax dollars spent more effectively. So that really is why I pointed to Lewis Reid in that piece. But ArchCity Defenders will be making no endorsement. In the past, I have only once or maybe twice individually signed on to some endorsements. I have not yet done that this year.
Did they win?
One did.
Because we all have spotty records on that.
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
Great.
Blake, now that the dust has settled a little since the jail uprising, aside from the fact that we all learned that they didn't think about having the cells with locks on them with the work, do you have any further thoughts or information about what caused this, and perhaps more importantly, what you think needs to be done at the downtown jail so that this doesn't happen again, and to fix the conditions?
Sure. So certainly what caused this was poor treatment and poor conditions in the jail. Again, starting at the end of December and throughout the month of January into February, we initially started hearing from people real concerns about a lack of COVID protocols in the jail, and that people who either had tested positive or were showing symptoms were being housed in the same units with no separation as people who were not sick and had not tested positive. And we didn't hear this from one person. We heard it over and over and over again, while at the same time hearing from the city that there were no COVID cases in the jail, which we now know to be completely untrue. So I think that really was the spark. There were other conditions related to the quality of the food, very cold temperatures, again, retaliation for people that were making these kinds of complaints. That's also been a real theme. And this was a series of protests. The first incident that we're aware of, people refused to return to their cells. They didn't take any action. They didn't go anywhere. They stood outside their cells and didn't go inside. Many of those people were then moved into segregation or moved to the workhouse. You saw in this most recent protest a sign that some of the folks were carrying that said "Free 57." And we understand that to be a reference to the 57 people who were moved after the last display of protest. So I think what we've seen actually from people in the jail are increasingly desperate acts to get the attention of people on the outside and try to bring more attention to the conditions that they're facing. To the question of what I think we need to do, I think there are a few things. One is we have, and this isn't a new problem, we have and have had for some time a pretrial detention crisis in this region. It's true in St. Louis City, it's true in St. Louis County, it's true in St. Charles County, it's true throughout the region that we are housing hundreds of people in our jails pre-trial, many of them on cash bails that they can't afford to pay, some of them on no bond orders. the overwhelming majority of them have not had their day in court, have not been convicted of anything, and they are sitting there for months or sometimes years without ever having any sort of conviction or getting their day in court. And that really is a humanitarian disaster. We should all be outraged about that, and we should be demanding that we actually embrace pretrial release as the norm, and detention should be the extreme exception. Unfortunately, it's the other way around for poor people in this region. So that's number one. Number two, the reason that we've been pushing to close the workhouse for 4 years now is because we understand that the money that we are sinking into this pretrial detention system, this system of mass incarceration, is preventing us from addressing the upstream causes of incarceration. If we actually were putting more money into community resources, into mental health, into job training, into education, which we can do, which we have the money to do, then we certainly would need to be caging people at the rate that we are. And we are an abolitionist organization. We think it's possible to get to a point where we don't have to cage people to solve our problems. But at least we should be able to agree as a first step that we are spending way, way, way too much of our money on that right now and need to do much less.
Mr. Strode, talking about that medium security workhouse, if you close it down, we are told that the residents would have to go to the City Justice Center, but it'd be so crowded they'd be basically living on top of each other. So the alternative would be to send them to neighboring incarceration facilities. But we understand there's no room at the inn locally. And according to published reports, those who are currently in the city jail would have to go to the Tennessee border, 4.5, 5 hours away, which would be really inconvenient for their attorneys and maybe family members for visits. So isn't that a real problem when we talk about closing the workhouse?
Yeah, I sort of smirked at that because I think there's been so much dishonest fear-mongering from some of our city officials. No one is calling for sending people 4 hours away to a jail in Kentucky. In fact, my reading of state law says that wouldn't even be legal to do. We couldn't do that if we wanted to. And certainly that's not the aim of this campaign. It is not true that we don't have enough room in our local jails, in our city jails, to house the jail population that exists in the city. One of the things that we've been pointing out for many months is that the city voluntarily houses federal detainees for the federal government that it does not actually have to house. Now, why they do that, you would have to bring on Jimmy Edwards or Lyda Crewson and ask why they continue to hold 200 people was the last estimate we heard from Dale Glass last week in the task force meeting, that he said it was about 200 federal detainees. There, very recently, and I think this is still true, but at my most recent count, there weren't 200 people in the workhouse. And so what we've been saying for months is you could stop housing a fraction of the federal detainees who would be housed in other local jails, in the county, municipal jails, Jefferson County, St. Charles, et cetera. They don't have to be housed in the city, and fit all of those people that the court has ordered to be detained pre-trial in the Justice Center. That was true a few months ago. It's still true now. But I would repeat that the jail population is still too high. Even with the too high population, we actually could accommodate that in one jail, but it's still too high. And we really need to find ways, which is what this division of supportive reentry was all about. It's what our bail litigation and our advocacy around cash bail is all about. We have to take steps to reduce our jail population overall. Pretrial detention has become such second nature in St. Louis that we assume it's the only option. It is not. And we need to reduce our jail population, and we can certainly fit everyone in one jail.
When it comes to the problem in this region, it sounds like it's specific, what you're talking about, to this region. Mr. Strode, is there a city, ArchCity Defenders is part of a network. You're constantly sharing information. Is there a city that's getting this done the right way?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I don't know that I would say this is solely a regional problem. I think it is reflective of a national problem, but there are places that are doing better and worse. So just to give you a few examples, when we first filed our federal bail litigation back in January of 2019, One of the stats that we pointed to is that only about 4% of people in the city of St. Louis at that time were being released on their own recognizance, meaning not having to put up any sort of collateral, any sort of money to be released. That number compared to 40%, 60%, and 80% in New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., respectively. So in some ways, we are at the extreme, have been at the extreme in terms of the number of people that we're detaining pre-trial. And that's why I keep pointing to that system, pointing to the way that bail operates in this region as one of the big problems. Now, in the past couple of years, the number of people held on cash bail has come down. And what's gone up significantly is the number of people detained, preventatively detained with no bond at all. And many of those people are going through the same unconstitutional bail proceedings as the people that are getting these unconstitutionally high cash bails. So it's a persistent issue. It has been the case for many years. It's why we continue to litigate this question around bail. But there are many places we can look to that have different bail processes and different bail outcomes than St. Louis that would really change the overall jail population here.
Well, Blake, I'm sure if we had a prosecutor or a police officer on, they'd say, we have such a problem getting witnesses to testify. And it's one reason we have such a low conviction rate and things go on. If we don't detain people after they're arrested, if we leave them right out, isn't that going to frighten witnesses even more?
So, well, one thing I would say is that Kim Gardner, actually, in the city, when we first filed the bail litigation and we're doing a lot of advocacy around the way the bail operates in the city to detain hundreds of poor people unnecessarily, she actually has put out some public statements, put forth policies, very much agreeing that we have a major pretrial detention problem in St. Louis. Now, as I've said to her, as I've said to other people, I think she and her office can and should do much more. And we certainly advocate with her office, with Wesley Bell's office, to take more aggressive steps than they've taken. But I'm not sure we would get disagreement from them on the point that we have a major pretrial detention problem in this region. I think you're pointing to something bigger when you start asking about witnesses and the unwillingness of people to come forward and participate in these processes. And that is that there is a lot of doubt and completely understandable and justified doubt that the system will serve the interests of people impacted by crime. It has not, it does not, it will not. And that's precisely why we're calling for divesting from that system and investing in new systems of support for people, new systems of accountability, new systems of repair for people that are impacted by harm. We can do a much better job of supporting people that have been harmed than the criminal legal system is equipped to do.
Okay. Well, Blake, I'm going to follow up on that. And just, I disagree with you there, okay? And I'll try to phrase this in the way of a question. I think the majority of people who are impacted by crime want to see the person who did it or persons who did it be in jail. And I don't think they're worried about kind of what happens to these people, these folks, once they are in jail. And I kind of counter, as you would say, you could foresee a time where nobody was incarcerated. I don't foresee that time because there's always going to be people that need to be in jail. And the energy, and it's your job, I understand it, the energy and the focus that you're bringing to me, I think the majority of the African-American population says, I wish somebody would find that energy and that focus to help young Black people that aren't in jail and haven't committed a crime and are living their life as close as they can in law-abiding ways. So I think do you feel that? I mean, because it sounds like you kind of feel like the majority of folks really, really, really care. And I just think that the majority of people don't care as much as you do.
Well, you said a lot there, so let me try to unpack some of it. I think it is undoubtedly true that there are people who have been living in really desperate situations, who simply want to be safe in their communities. They want people to respond when they feel under threat. They want accountability when harm is done. And they want repair for that harm. There's no question. People want that. It is a false choice to suggest that the only way of achieving that is by incarcerating people, and particularly incarcerating them at the level that we do. In fact, harm occurs at really startling rates in many communities all the time. One of the things that we know about the criminal legal system is it's not capturing wrongdoers. It's not capturing people that are committing wrongful acts or harmful acts indiscriminately. It is targeting certain communities. It is targeting poor communities. It's targeting communities of color. It is criminalizing certain activities only in some neighborhoods and not in others. That has been true for the full stretch of the history of the criminal legal system, and it's true now. So I think we have to take seriously what people want, which is to feel safe, which is to feel supported, which is to feel like they have someone to call when they feel under threat. Absolutely. You will get no argument from me about that. But our criminal legal system is not actually doing that. And it's not even capturing all of the people that are doing harm. We know that there's only a small slice of people that are actually charged or arrested at all, a smaller slice that are convicted. So it's not as if we're even doing a good job of accountability for people that are committing acts of harm. So what I'm suggesting is not actually, I think, in tension with the idea that people deserve justice. It is precisely trying to get justice for people and acknowledging that the way we're going about it now is failing by every metric. You don't have to be an abolitionist to know that our criminal legal system is not getting the job done.
Blake, there's a tab on your website at ArchCity Defenders called Fatal State Violence. And it's I know your organization's involved on the issue of deaths in jail and deaths at the hands of police officers, basically.
Yes.
When that isn't in the news, as it was obviously with tragedies such as George Floyd, et cetera, Breonna Taylor, whatever, is that an ongoing thing, or do you get, it seems to me that the momentum for reforms in the criminal justice system sort of subsided after last summer. Speak to that and what you're doing about that issue.
Yeah, well, it certainly has not subsided with us or the people that we work with. And St. Louis is ground zero for this problem of fatal state violence. One of the things we point out in the report that was released, and I appreciate you pointing out, people can find it on our website. I hope they go there and read it and learn more. St. Louis is number one in police killings per capita of any major metropolitan area in the country. And that's been true for a number of years. We documented in a 10-year span between 2009 and 2019, 147 incidents of fatal state violence. And we included in that the majority of those are police killings, and some subset are folks who lost their lives while in local jails. And so that's 147 families. And we know, by the way, we didn't catch everything. We sent sunshine requests. We did, media research. We found everything we could. We know we didn't capture everything. That's 147 families who don't have their loved ones today. That's 147 brothers, sisters, cousins, mothers. People are carrying the scars of that in our community right now, today. We can tragically predict every year a certain number of people who will be killed by police or die in jail. It's been like clockwork. I mean, this is a really horrible superlative for St. Louis that has been true for too many years. And so we were glad to release that report. We're going to continue to do both legal work around it, work supporting the families, because part of what brought this project about was that in working with families, we've seen the ways in which after someone's killed by police, they can't get any information. The culture of policing immediately closes rank, doesn't provide any information, doesn't answer any questions. Oftentimes, people can't even get access to the bodies of their loved ones to have a funeral. There's no support to help afford the funeral costs. We've had people for months saying, I just want to bury my child, and they can't even do that. And so this is such a huge problem that impacts so many people that I think you're right, has flown under the radar. And it does speak to the way that our system is throwing away certain people and throwing away families that are impacted.
Blake Strode from the ArchCity Defenders. That completes this half hour. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your views. We sure appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great week, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9 PBS.